My guest is Matt Leinart. He is the co-founder of Hall of Goats. He is an analyst for Fox Sports, 2004 Heisman Trophy winner, two-time college football national champion, former NFL quarterback, 37-2 at USC. You can follow him on Twitter at Matt Leinart QB. Matt, thanks for joining me on Sports Business Radio. How are you?
I'm good, Brian. Thanks for having me, man. Just, getting ready for football season. We're about a month away, which is exciting. So it's been a kind of a whirlwind off season in college athletics, as you know. And I'm just really excited to get back to work and travel and watch these kids play. It's going to be fun.
A lot of things I want to cover with you, but I guess let's start there. Your USC Trojans are going to the Big Ten, UCLA reportedly going as well. I mean, when you think of the Big Ten, I don't think of the West Coast. It's such a shakeup for the sports landscape. It looks like we have these super conferences now with the Big Ten and the SEC. Where's this all going? Is it good?
Yeah, I mean, look, I think it's just, is it good or bad? I think it depends on if you're kind of getting on the train or you're not of college athletics. I mean, I think you can argue for it, you can argue against it. I think with the shift of, like you said, the way college athletics are moving and kind of this realignment, and really with Oklahoma and Texas last year announcing they were going to join the SEC, it sort of kind of sent a ripple effect throughout college athletics and college football in particular. And with a team like USC and just a brand like USC and UCLA, I think it was important for them to, get to a conference where they can really maximize the power of that brand. Obviously, financial aspect of it for that school is huge, but the exposure, the competitiveness of that conference, and then also, as you said, the Big Ten now will be the only conference that stretches from coast to coast. So it's a national conference. So look, I get a lot of people kind of upset and this and that, but at this point, like, you have to get on board with the way college athletics is changing. You have NIL, you have transfer portal, you have realignment. It's all happening, and it's happening very fast. And, you have to kind of get on board with it, or else you'll get left behind.
I saw a few comments from people who play in the Pac-12, and I'm friends with a few of the players, and they've always talked about exposure. Their games take place late at night on a Saturday. Yep. People aren't seeing them. They're not as considered for Heisman trophies, even though you won one. How much does that factor into the athlete's thoughts of, I want to play in a conference where I'm going to be seen more?
It's huge, especially nowadays with these kids. They're getting so much more exposure at a young age with just social media and the access that they're giving to fans, recruiting, coaches, all that. And then also the access that those platforms are just creating for them. So, these student athletes aren't dumb. They understand, like, hey, I want to go to a conference and compete against the best. I think that's always at the forefront, despite all of these other things going on. They want to go compete. They want to be on TV. They want to, now with NIL, build a brand. And not all of them are going to have those opportunities, but that access is there. And if you go to a conference like the Big Ten, you're playing on national television every single week. You are traveling a lot more from a West Coast team. But again, you talk about the resources that you're going to have, the exposure that you're going to have, the financial impact it's going to have for your respective sport. It just makes total sense. I think if you're a USC and you're a UCLA, being in the LA market, which is massive, and even for the Big Ten, now the Big Ten can stretch to the West Coast and be in that big LA market. So I think it's a win for both sides, and I'm looking forward. It's getting used to here a little bit, but looking forward to that.
What do you think happens to the conferences that aren't the SEC and the Big Ten, like the Pac-12? Do they just, deteriorate? Do they turn into nothing like the Pac-12? Do a bunch of other universities say, hey, I'm going to go to a different conference? What happened, do you think?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. I think, the Big 12 last year with the announcement of Oklahoma and Texas, they moved very swiftly. They added a couple really solid programs to that conference, and they kind of, they had stability, and they're in a stable spot. I mean, they weren't the SEC and they're not going to be the Big Ten, but they're in a stable spot. So, I don't know. I think at the end of the day, George, the commissioner, is a really good guy. He's smart. He understands it. He walked into a difficult situation, and now even more difficult. But they'll figure out a way to make sure that they're staying afloat and they're stable. And if that's merging with another conference or bringing other schools into the conference, that's going to be the choice that they make. So you can't speculate. I don't know what's going to happen, but I know that they're trying to move fast and swiftly to figure this out.
When I think about college athletes in my lifetime, I think of like Christian Leitner, but I think of you and Reggie Bush. And I think of how well would you have done with name, image, and likeness that if it had been around when you were playing? I mean, you would have made a boatload. Someone like Zion Williams.
Right.
I mean, these are athletes that were iconic in college where you just go, wow, this would have been huge for you. Do you ever think about that? And, I now know that you're part of the Hall of GOATs, which we'll talk about in a minute, but do you ever look back and go, man, why couldn't we have this around when I was playing?
I do. I mean, now that it's legal and at the forefront of everything, I think more people come up to me and be like, man, you would have made millions of dollars. And then I'm thinking like, yeah, I probably actually would have. Like, I mean, you like realistically, Reggie, myself, probably some of those other players. I mean, we brought in so much money to USC over the course of the 3 years that I started there. And then even the year before when Carson won the Heisman and we won the Orange Bowl. And then the years after, I mean, I don't know, brought in probably hundreds of millions of dollars to that school and, over a course of those years and never saw a dime of it. So, but, at the end of the day, it is what it was. That the rules weren't in place then, they're in place now. And, that's why I'm getting involved with NIL and trying to help these players just because they deserve it. They're working extremely hard, and that's all sports, all student athletes working extremely hard at their craft, putting a lot of time and effort, and they don't get rewards off that, but everyone else can do that. So now they do, which I think is great.
What's the recipe for successful name, image, and likeness deals in your mind?
Wow. It's a really challenging question. I think listen, I think it goes from both sides. You want to present an opportunity to a student athlete that allows them to maximize their potential and allows them to maximize the opportunity. That looks different in a lot of different cases. I think it depends on the sport, the player, the position, all of those things that are happening. So they're all very different. But at the end of the day, for me, we want to give these players an opportunity to make money. The more you dive into it, the more you can market yourself, brand yourself, the more opportunity you are going to make money. So for us, it's more about, and with Hall of GOATs, it's really more about building a brand that they can go and that can last longer than football or basketball, their sport. I think there's a lot of bad representation out there. My wife's a corporate attorney. She's working on NIL. She's doing stuff related to this, and she sees a lot of bad contracts out there. And I think that's the one thing too for success, and really more almost for advice purposes, advising these players to really read the contract. And if you don't understand it, which is fine, because I do things still that I don't understand in my contract, but reaching out, having people around you that can help. And if they don't know, then you go ask a teacher, ask a counselor, ask a coach, ask somebody. But the more you can learn about these contracts as a player, the better off you're going to be in the long run. So that's kind of what success looks like for me, not necessarily in the personal deals that I'm trying to do with players or our company's trying to do with players, but just in general. I think it's so new. It's the wild, wild west, which we've heard many, many times, and it truly is, because it's just there's not one really straightforward policy. Schools are different, states are different. Some schools are involved, some schools aren't. Player representation is different. A lot of these, there's evaluations out there for what these players are. They're saying that they're worth, that they're not really worth that much. So you're balancing a lot of different things right now, which was expected. And I think everyone is just trying to navigate kind of through these waves right now, and at some point over the next couple of years, it'll start to really, I think, level itself out. I think the policies will be pretty much in unison for the most part. The market will kind of correct itself. I think you've seen some wild numbers be thrown out there. That's going to change. It just will. But until then, you kind of just have to survive and try and create the best opportunities for these players and do it in a way that's the right way.
I listened to Lane Kiffin this week at SEC Media Day, and he said what you just said. It's the Wild West, and it's kind of an arms race, right? Like if you have the most amount of money and you can offer a player a lot of money, it's going to make a difference for them. Do you see that continuing to be a factor? And really, there's no salary cap that I've seen where, you cap it for, hey, Alabama can only sign a certain number of players at this dollar amount. You can spend however much you want.
Yeah, I mean, well, that's the thing. And that's the thing that I think will at some point sort of level itself out. Obviously, these rules were written and there's a lot of gray area, which a lot of schools, people are exploiting. I don't say schools, boosters, alumni, these collectives, people are kind of exploiting that gray area. And I think at some point, like you said, I mean, it is an arms race. I mean, there's just schools that have a lot more money and they have people behind it that are willing to pay X amount of dollars to get players there. Now that's not legal, and there's ways that these teams are doing, or these people are doing that. And I think that's sort of the concern and the uproar that a lot of coaches have, athletic directors have, presidents have. But like I said, the rules were written in the way that they were written currently. That is changing. Policies are changing. A lot of this stuff will correct itself because you're going to have some players that aren't going to live up to maybe what their earning was. And you're going to have, these companies, brands, alumni, whoever it is, kind of back off a little bit, I think. So that's all going to happen. It's just a matter of when and how long and all those things. So with all that being said, there's a lot of great collectives out there. There's a lot of great institutions that are doing it the right way and really creating real opportunities for their student athletes, and using it and these student athletes are using it as a great platform for them to connect with brands and companies and all of those things. And that's what this is all about.
We're going to talk about Hall of Goats in a minute, but I'm really curious, when you were going to USC and you're 37-2 and you guys are on TV every week, who did you turn to for advice? I mean, you just mentioned the importance of being able to talk to a teacher or a lawyer or someone who knew what they were doing. I would imagine you had all kinds of opportunities thrown on your lap. As a young 20-year-old, who were you turning to guide you?
Yeah, that's a great question. And, I think at the time, obviously it was different because there wasn't, companies knocking on my door because we just couldn't do it. But I think as I got in my senior year and I graduated knowing the NFL was there, I had my family around me. I had a few people that were kind of in my circle for a long time that I trusted. And that circle changes obviously as you get older and it's not the same, but in that moment. But I think the important thing for schools and even down at the high school level, I think it's so important, like for high school athletes that can make money, the state of California, high school athletes can make money off their NIL. For those high schools, those coaches, those academic counselors, there needs to be courses that are taught. And I really believe that's going to happen just because this is becoming, there'll be a, financial literacy course or an NIL course, that's going to be offered at some point with all of these high schools and all of the states that it's legal to do that. But for these players, it starts there. Start with your family. Your family can talk to your coaches, your counselors, anybody at your high school. And if they don't, everyone knows somebody. Maybe they have a great financial advisor that you can talk to and consult with. So I'm hopeful that that they'll do the due diligence, right? And not just take the first thing that's what I've seen is you get dangled a carrot and it's like, oh, that carrot tastes good, let's just get it right away. But you don't really know what that means. And you may be signing your life away for 3 years for $10,000. I mean, that happens all the time because that's good money. And a lot of these kids have never seen that before. And then especially at the collegiate level, I mean, every institution, and I've talked to some, and they are going to do this, but needs to implement a course with financial education and literacy and NIL and how to use a credit card, how to set up an account, just basic 101, how to read contracts, so that they can just have a basic understanding of how this is all working. And I think we'll get there really fast, and I think that will really help kind of to allow everyone to take a deep breath, understand what's going on, and make sure that these kids are getting taken care of in the right way.
All right, I want to hear about Hall of Goats. I know you are the co-founder. You've started this with Caleb Williams, who's currently the quarterback at USC. I know you have some other people involved. What was kind of the impetus to start this company?
Yeah, well, my one of my really good friends, Greg Carlson, he built the platform, and he was my teammate at USC. He was a former walk-on receiver, earned a scholarship, and was there during that whole run. We were roommates for 3 years. So he presented kind of this opportunity, kind of the end of last fall, that he'd been working on. And originally his vision for this kind of NFT platform was in, I think the like EA Sports World or something like that, you know, a different thing. But as the NIL unfolded, he was like, wow, like this is a great opportunity, you know, that we can kind of build in this NIL world and start with the amateur athletes, you know, high school and college. He kind of gave me kind of the genesis of that, kind of what his vision was, the team he already had in place. And I was like, I'm in. Like, one, we're boys. I thought, I didn't know much about NFTs, Web3, crypto, really nothing. I'd heard about it. So I did a little deep dive with him just to get a basic understanding of what this actually is, and then how it can help these kids, or how it ties in, or, you know, do I want to be a part of this? Obviously, I have a job and I cover college sports, and it just was a no-brainer. And, you know, Hall of Goats, it's morphed, and it continues to morph as things change. You know, we're building a video game which within Hall of Goats, and basically these NFTs and the people who buy these NFTs of their favorite college player, they can play with that NFT within the video game. And wow, you know, you can think of kind of like NFL Blitz style, kind of the arcade style game, fun, big tackling, taunting, like, you know, the fun game that we played as kids. So we're currently in those stages right now of building this video game. And we just, and again, for us, we think, hey, these players can live in this video game forever, and they can make money off their NFT sales. They can make money off all of the microtransactions within the video game. If I don't know if you're much of a gamer, or maybe your kids are gamers, but you know, when you play video games, you spend a lot of money within the video game, buying whatever accessories, leveling up your players, whatever it is. So a lot of those things will happen within our game, and the players see royalties off of those as well. So it's just a way where, you know, I think, you know, hey, you want to be in this video game, which is pretty cool. You know, and you can make money off of that, you know, and you can market yourself, you can brand yourself. We do merchandise, we're doing other things like that, but essentially that's what Hall of Goats is. And, you know, we really want to be kind of that biggest player in that space, and we're excited about it. Obviously, teaming up with Caleb has been great. Caleb, you know, just a great dude, great talent on the field, has really kind of led the charge as far as NIL and kind of how to go about it. Obviously, he's had tremendous opportunity, and he's super grateful for that, but just doing it the right way. He's taking care of his teammates. He's taking care of, you know, the women's basketball team at USC. He's just done a lot of good with it, which I love. And he'll continue to do that. So it really was a no-brainer for us to kind of team up with him. And then obviously the USC connection is there, and for sure, but this is something that, you know, we're going national with, and we want, you know, we have a partnership with Elite 11, which is great. We're working on other partnerships as we speak. So a lot of cool stuff going on. We're excited about kind of the trajectory of where it's going to go and the vision that we have, and all the players that we think we'll be able to work with.
Yeah, I love it. Seems like you have a great team assembled. I like the branding a lot. I think it's really Cool. You guys did a great job with that. And yeah, I'm impressed by Caleb. I mean, obviously he's a great talent on the field, but he seems pretty darn savvy for his
Mm-hmm.
age off the field as well. And I have been watching the deals that he's been making. So I think it's a great partnership.
Yeah, he's, and again, he's just been really smart. And the thing that I love about him too is he's so helpful with his teammates. Because look, he's a starting quarterback at USC. He's going to get those deals. Not, he's in the less than 1% that's going to
Right.
be able to make real money, and he understands that. But he's really done a good job of sort of being like, hey, I get that, but I also want to make sure that that my players are taken care of. That's my responsibility. And not everyone's thinking that way. He's got a great team around him that has done a really good job. And like he's really been sort of a pioneer. And I think he's setting the bar really high because of the way he's just going about it. And but I think everyone can learn from it. They really can. They can learn kind of how to start to think outside the box. He real estate deal, the Beats by Dre, like he's really sort of, spreading wide in this as far as all of the different kind of brands and companies he's working with. And again, someone, the third string quarterback's not going to have those opportunities, but maybe Caleb, is helping him of networking and meeting people and starting to think, hey, this is what you can start thinking about. So, and I know he's taken on that role. So super exciting, obviously just excited to watch him play this year, watch USC play, and just call it, like I said, college football in general. Like, I think we're just itching to get back and start playing these games.
I want to talk about your career at USC for a minute. Like I said, 37-2. I mean, just incredible. 2 national championships, a Heisman Trophy. A few things I wanted to ask you about. One, you had a really hard decision. You had an incredible junior year. And a lot of people would have said, you know what? I'm going to the NFL. You came back for another year of college. Do you ever look back and go, maybe that wasn't the best decision? Or do you say, you know what? It was great to come back for my senior year because it's such a hard decision.
Yeah, I mean, I've had not one regret, and it's been, 16, 17 years, whatever it's been. I think I get it. And I came off that game against Miami. But truth of the matter is there's a few things, I always deep down just wanted to, I loved what we were doing. I loved being at USC. I loved being a kid. I loved the run that we were on, truly. Like, I just didn't want to leave college football and leave USC. And that was a big reason. I had, 2 or 4 more credits to graduate, whatever. I was pretty close to graduating. That was important to me. It was important to my mom. So I was able to do that when I returned for my 5th year. And then lastly, like, I was pretty beat up. I ended up getting surgery on my elbow right when I announced, I think in January, February. I was dealing with tendonitis. I didn't feel as strong. I played well. I was coming off the Heisman that game, and I get all that, but I just didn't feel like I was physically at my best to get ready to go to a draft and compete and do all of these things. So all of that collectively was just like, what, at the end of the day, I'm going to come back. I'm going to be another year, better, more prepared. I'll get physically stronger. I'll play, I'll learn more about defense. My senior year, I came back, I watched NFL film. Pete Carroll said, Matt, start watching NFL film. So he kind of helped me break down a little bit of how you watch it. So I would watch that. And then we were close. We lost to Texas in the Rose Bowl, but we had a chance to play for three national championships in a row, which is just doesn't happen. So
yeah, it's unheard of.
And obviously it didn't end the way we wanted it to, but forever, we'll be a part of that.
I've had Pete Carroll on this show, and I mean, I find him to be like the Energizer Bunny. I've never seen anyone with his energy. He just walks into a room and just lights up the room. What was it like playing for him?
As you probably could imagine, it was, let me tell you, so I had committed to Paul Hackett and that staff. They got fired. I decommitted and kind of kept my options open when Pete was hired, because, Pete was coming from the NFL. I didn't know much about him, but I'll tell you what, the energy that you kind of see now and what you've probably always seen and what you've always thought of Pete, like just bouncing off the walls. That's how it was since day one. And that's probably, I mean, he was a great coach. Obviously, he's a great motivator, great kind of philosophy about things and how he spoke to us. He just is rare in that regard. But he was he was just very straightforward. Like that's who he was. That's his personality. He wasn't a fraud. It wasn't fake. He had the energy every single day. He brought it every day, and we fed off of it. It really was infectious, and that's a big part of why we were so successful. Is that, yeah, the talent was there, and they recruited extremely well, and we had great players. But like, you wanted to run through a wall for him, because it was just always like that. He was always on and always excited, and it was like he made you feel so excited to go to practice every day and all of those things and compete. And not a lot of coaches have that gift. They just don't. He was great with X's and O's and all that, but he had that rare ability to just get the best out of all of us and make it fun and exciting.
My favorite game of your career, you played a lot of great games, but the Bush Push at Notre Dame. I mean, that was such a classic game. What was that like? I mean, because it really looked like there for a while you guys were going to lose that game, and you found a way to win that game. And I would say that summed up your career at USC. Is even when it looked like you guys were going to lose, you would always find a way to win most games except for 2 games.
Yeah, it was. That's a good point. Yeah, we always found ways to win. What people, you can look at the record and all that, but it's like, and everyone knows this that plays, like, it is really hard to win every single game. It just is, like, especially at that high level. And there's always going to be a team that's going to just get up, and for whatever reason, you kind of get out of bed different that day, and it's all of a sudden you're like, oh my gosh, we're in a battle in the fourth quarter. That happened against Arizona State a couple times. It happened against Stanford one year. Obviously, the Fresno State game my senior year, there were probably 5 to 6 games in those 3 years, 7 games, that were like, shouldn't have been as close as they were, but they just are, because that's what's great about college sports. And you talk about the Bush Push. That was a great game. I mean, obviously, 2 top 10 teams at the time, going into Notre Dame, which is always special. The green uniforms they busted out. They again, it was their Super Bowl. Beating us was their Super Bowl, and they had a great year, and I think played in a big bowl game that year. But like, beating USC, knocking off the number 1 team, the defending champ, and that they win that game, maybe they're in the BCF national championship game. So it was a very, for me personally, I always say this, it was a very sloppy game for me personally up until like the last 2 minutes. And I think that's what's cool about football. And Pete always said, hey man, like, you're not going to win the game in the first 3 quarters. You're going to win the game in the fourth quarter. It doesn't matter. In the fourth quarter, that's when you win the football game. And we did. We went on that drive. We had the completion to Dwayne on the 4th and 9, which was huge. Reggie just made some very underrated plays on that drive that moved the chains that no one really talks about. And then obviously the Bush Push at the end, where I got a little help from my buddy, which is totally fine. And gosh, but it is a great memory. I think just in that rivalry is so undervalued. It's such one of the best rivalries forever, just because of the history and the players and the coaches and gosh, all the Heisman winners, like, everything about that rivalry, it was so special. And to win like that in that atmosphere was pretty awesome.
I know we just have a couple minutes left. You do a great job with Fox Sports. It's not an easy transition from being an athlete to being on TV. You've been doing this for a while now. How did you make the transition, and kind of walk me through what your prep is each week?
Yeah, so the transition wasn't, I was very lucky and fortunate to, when I retired in 13, I took a couple months off. I was like, all right, I'm married now. I met my wife right before that at the time. So that was super exciting, like something new. And I kind of knew that we were going to go down that path, even very early in our relationship. So there were like good things going. And I was just mentally like, I'm just done. Like, I want to break. Let me regroup here. And it didn't last long, because obviously, creature of habit, routine, like, you want to be busy and do something. So there were some people at Fox, and I hired my agent at the time, because I knew it was something that I wanted to try. I didn't know what I would do. I didn't know if I'd be any good at it, but I wanted to try to get in broadcasting, whatever that meant. And obviously Fox is right down the street here in LA. There was a couple people there, USC people, that just, we made the connection, and again, just super grateful, and started kind of, I'll say at the bottom, but I just started, like, did a couple random shows and to see if I liked it. Didn't really have a deal, a couple one-off things, and I think I showed potential, but I still wasn't like, So my role kind of grew there as they started kind of thinking, because FS1 just launched in that year or the year before. So we were still trying to like figure out what shows to put on air, and getting teams in place, all of those things. So started doing more and more shows, and then there was an opportunity, for me, when Joel Klatt, who's one of the best in college football, one of my good friends, went up to the booth. So his chair kind of came open on the studio show, and that's when I went in the studio show originally with Coach Wanstead, who I love, Robert Smith, who's great, and Rob Stone, and we started doing that, and that kind of morphed into what we are now as a Big Noon Kickoff. Obviously, some new faces and stuff, but it's been 8 years. So I've grown and really kind of moved up the ladder, and just worked really hard, and been really grateful for the people at Fox that believe in me. And just, it's just such a great atmosphere there. I mean, everyone, the boss, everyone, it's so much fun. And so very lucky, some great people there that kind of got me to this point. And now, and to answer the second part of your question, kind of the prep and what does the week look like, we're on the road every single week, with Big Noon. So we're traveling, which is awesome. We did that last year about 92% of the time. This year we're on every week, 2-hour show. We go to our Big Noon game of the week, have a blast, all those things. So, as far as the week, everyone always asks me, it's like, how much prep goes into that? Because some people know that there's a lot, and some people just think you kind of just show up and you talk. And I'm like, right. No, actually there's a lot more than you would think, because you're on national television. You're going to get exploited and exposed really quick if you don't prepare and you don't know what you're talking about. Some of it's just football, so you can talk ball because you have the experience and you've been in the locker room and you played in big games and you can relate that way. But then a lot of it is like, there's a lot of stuff going on in college football. There's a lot of moving parts that are, there's, it's not like NFL where all you have is free agency, but for the most part, these teams stay intact for years. Like, there's always people graduating or leaving the NFL, and there's always new recruits coming in. So you're constantly changing. So that to me is the fun part, is because it's challenging in that regard, to where you're constantly learning and constantly studying, and watch a lot of film early in the week. I do an interview with kind of a power player of the week every week. So I go into the studio usually every Tuesday and Wednesday, and I'll sit down with a player, and from wherever the play, we try. Our team does a great job of reaching out and getting the players that have a big week prior. So do that, which is a lot of fun. Talk to our producers throughout the week, kind of find out, you have a 2-hour show. Basically the way it works, you have a 2-hour show. There's all these blocks, as I'm sure you've heard. You have A block all the way down to the J block, and each block is 8 minutes, 6 minutes, whatever, and then you have your commercial break, and then you go to the next block. So there's a lot to unpack, because we're a national show, so we hit on our game a lot, but we're also hitting on the storylines throughout college football and some of the other big games that are happening that day. So there's a lot of prep, and I would say this: Joel Klatt gave me some of the best advice when I took his kind of seat years ago. And because I sat with him, I said, okay, like, studio show, at that time it was a 30-minute show, which is so short. You would literally get like 2 minutes of talking in. But I was like, how do you prepare? Like, just like basic questions. And he said, the studio show is this: prepare a mile wide and an inch deep, instead of an inch, a mile deep and an inch wide, which is really what a game is, right? Because if you're calling a game, you're talking about storylines, but you're talking about that game. So you're preparing everything for that game, with a couple bullet points here and there throughout college football. On a studio show, you're covering, say, 100 games and 100 players and different storylines, but you're doing it in a much shorter time. So that was like the best advice. He's like, prepare. And I think a lot of people in my profession just over prepare. You always just want to be prepared and stuff if things are different, or you're reacting to stuff, obviously. But so that's like the preparation. I've always used that advice, like prepare for everything, every big game, every player that you have an eye on, because we react a lot throughout the day. Well, it's different now because we'll do a halftime and post game and then we're done. But sometimes when we would be a full day, you're reacting to stuff, and you want to have some prep in your mind about, well, that game even though it's not our game on our network or whatever, that Alabama game, man, I had my eyes on Bryce Young and I want to see how he did. Oh yeah, that's the notes I had. Let's talk about it. So like you're diving into a lot of different areas. So there's a lot. I mean, I know that was a long-winded answer, but there's a lot of prep that goes on, and I take it serious. I love my job. I love the people I work with. We bounce ideas off each other all the time. We make fun of each other. We laugh. I mean, I think that's what makes good television. So it's a blast, though. Really is.
You do a fantastic job. I'm not just saying that. You do a really good job.
Thank you.
Before I let you go, I want to give you the opportunity to talk about the Matt Leinart Foundation. I know you're doing really good work in the community. Tell our audience about that a little bit.
Oh yeah, I mean, we just had our annual golf event. So I started my foundation, gosh, right out of college. I was like 22, 23, and it was so broad. My brother who runs it I just told him and my family, like, I just want to help kids. Like, I want to help underprivileged kids. I don't know what that looks like, but I want to do it. So that morphed into a lot of, and that was then, and that morphed into like 10 years of just, really helping inner city youth and underprivileged kids. And, whether it was the football league that we had for years, giving these kids an opportunity to play football, whether it was various camps, whether it was, supplying equipment for a lot of kids. It just ranged from, it was a very broad strokes, but it really had one point. It was like, hey, we want to give these kids an opportunity that they wouldn't necessarily have. So that is, and we still do some stuff like that, but that has shifted as of recently. In the last couple of years, I've been on the board at Chalk Children's Hospital, which is the Children's Hospital of Orange County, where I grew up. And I got connected with them. Obviously, I've known about the hospital forever, but got connected with them, sit on the board, and it's really just been kind of an eye-opening experience for me. Just one, the people there are so tremendous, but just being involved in that hospital and me being a dad of 3 boys and just understanding, like, just having healthy kids is like, we almost take that for granted every day. And so we started a program with Chalk called the Dream Big program, which basically we help and we fund, but we help kind of create almost like Make-A-Wish, where we kind of help create these opportunities and experiences for the kids that are in the hospital. And a lot of them are terminally ill. So we're trying to, bring some joy to their face, bring some joy to their family, create, we had a wedding, not too long ago. We've had just, as far as like meeting their favorite football player. And we had a kid who loved the Chargers so much, and he ended up passing away. But the coach went over there to talk to him, and a couple players sent him some FaceTime videos, like little things like that we can kind of use our reach and use our networking and the resources that we have and the money we raise to do that. And again, it's hit home, just obviously being a dad. I have an older son, but I have 2 little boys, and fortunately they're healthy and strong and all that, but I know that's not all the case for everybody. And just really grateful to be a part of Chalk. So that program has been really important. And COVID, it was challenging during COVID because of just the restrictions, but the restrictions are gone now. So there's a lot more interaction and a lot more things that we can do now. So it's awesome. So that's what it's about. I've just appreciate all our supporters and donors and over the years, and it's really helped make a difference.
Matt Leinart, co-founder, Hall of Goats, analyst on Fox Sports. I just love what you're doing. We just had a great conversation about all the different things that you're doing. And, you had a stellar career at USC and in the NFL. You've parlayed it into all these wonderful things. I love what you're doing in the community. Thanks for joining me on Sports Business Radio.
Thanks, Brian. Appreciate it, man.